Right, so I'm back speaking with Professor James Arvanitakis, Pro Vice Chancellor Engagement at Western Sydney University and 2020 Fulbright Scholar. James, thanks so much for speaking with me again.
Alex,
Well,
interesting
now when we
times, aren't they?
indeed, when we last spoke, it was you were agreeing with Michael Moore's sentiments that the Democrats had underestimated Trump's support in key battleground states, and you'd said that relying on Trump's mistakes to get him unelected was a misguided strategy by the Democrats. Now, while we didn't see a landslide for either side on Tuesday, we've definitely seen some dramatic polling discrepancies. And I'll just set that up a little bit. So Florida polling had Biden up from anywhere from 1 to 8% just this month. Trump has won Florida by a comfortable 3-point margin. Nevada was won by Clinton in 2016. It was almost a write-off for Republicans. And pollsters had Biden with a comfortable margin between 2 to 7%, but it's currently on a knife's edge. Pennsylvania, similarly, polls had Biden up between 2 and 9%. But Trump actually ended Tuesday with a double-digit margin. And it's still early days. The latter two states I just mentioned have yet to be called, and there's still a huge number of ballots to be counted. But so far, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, look, I unfortunately, there's a few takeaways. One is that America is a deeply divided country. It's a blue state and a red state, and they don't talk to each other. They live in two almost parallel universes, which is a real concern for the future of American democracy. The other takeaway is that, we should understand that polls are a simple point in time, and it's almost like, who do you intend to vote for? Who would you vote for today? And those things, especially for swing voters or undecided voters, can change very quickly. And there was the virus, that the pandemic played a significant role in turning people away from the Trump campaign. But it was when people came down to it, when they walked into the election booth and they went to press that button, was that going to be enough to hold them to vote against where they were originally going to intend to vote? And the answer is obviously no. And I think people shouldn't be surprised by that. The third takeaway, and I think what we need to recognize is the fact that, especially America, generic polls, even statewide polls, don't capture the complexity of that population. We can begin to divide or break down the parts of the American public that voted for Trump or supported Biden or whatever. These are complex, and it's very hard for polling to capture that. And again, so we maybe should be looking for margins of error of 6% or 7% rather than 3%, which is what they talk about. So there's the positive things to take away from this. That a lot of people expected huge amounts of violence and civil unrest. That didn't eventuate. In whatever happened in very few places and wasn't particularly newsworthy. I think that's a positive to take away. The second positive to take away is the fact that Statista, the website, I reported that this was the highest voter turnout since 1900. So it's great to see people engaged in democratic processes. The third thing to take out was didn't seem to be any external influence impacting on the voting. So nothing hugely irregular there. So hoping that despite the division of the nation, that this is a stress test that the country comes through in a positive way. The question is what happens next, and that's the other unknown, right?
Indeed, and I mean your point about polling. They say hindsight is always 20/20, and there were many explanations for the polling errors in 2016 that definitely sounded reasonable in retrospect. I'm sure they'll be explaining these ones for the next 4 years as well. Is traditional polling relevant in 2020?
Look, I think polling is relevant. If we under two very specific. I mean, I think polling is relevant. Yes, it is. But we've got to recognise again that it's a point in time, and that people tend to read into polls what they want to read into polls, right? And so what we should maybe think about is polls is more about sentiment rather than a vote. A poll is not a vote; it's a snapshot, as I said. And so it captured a sentiment, and that sentiment was anger at a poor showing by the Trump administration on dealing with the pandemic. But this was not long before the pandemic. There was a research done by Pew that indicated that Americans felt that they were better off under Trump than they were 4 years previously under the Obama administration. And what's really important to recognize about that is that, well, and if they believe that Trump was the person that got them there, then who was going to be the person that was going to lead them out of this current economic quagmire driven by the pandemic? People aren't blaming Donald Trump for the pandemic, and that's fair enough. He didn't cause the pandemic. So I think that's important that we recognise that these are moment snapshots in time, and they won't necessarily eventuate into the outcome. So I don't think polling is dead. I just think we just need to be circumspecting what a poll means. And I think there's good polling and there's bad polling, and there's also good interpretation and bad interpretation.